My neighbour from hell, pool drama ends in victory. I moved into Oakridge Estates on a seemingly ordinary September afternoon. But little did I know, I was stepping into a viper's nest. My SUV, crammed with the remnants of my life after the divorce, crawled down the pristine streets. The house wasn't grand, not by a long shot, but it was mine. 3 bedrooms, a decent-sized yard, and, most importantly, a pool. I had fought tooth and nail to keep that pool in the settlement, even though my ex had never cared for it. It was one of the few things that had ever truly belonged to me, and after the absolute chaos of the past year, I wasn't about to relinquish one more source of peace. At first glance, the neighborhood appeared picture perfect, almost to perfect. Every lawn was aggressively manicured, every car spotless. It reeked of a place where people cared far too much about keeping up appearances and gossiping about their neighbors. But I wasn't looking for friends, I was desperate for quiet. That illusion shattered when Marsha Delacroix appeared on my doorstep, a storm cloud in a designer blouse. She was in her mid-50s, her hair a precisely engineered shade of platinum blonde, and she wore an expensive-looking blouse that was far too formal for a casual visit. Her smile was a carefully crafted facade that never quite reached her eyes. A clipboard, her weapon of choice, rested against her hip. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped. "I'm Marsha, president of the HOA. I nodded curtly. "Nice to meet you." Without waiting for an invitation, she edged closer, her eyes darting past me into my house like she was meticulously cataloguing everything she saw. I felt a surge of protectiveness, a primal need to shield my space from her invasive gaze. I shifted slightly, blocking her view. "I just wanted to introduce myself and go over some of the community guidelines," she continued, flipping through the pages on her clipboard with practiced ease. "I know moving in can be overwhelming, and we want to make sure all our residents feel supported." Supported? That felt like a loaded word. There was something in her tone, something calculating and rehearsed, that set my teeth on edge. Then, her gaze landed on my backyard. "You have a lovely pool," she said, tilting her head in a way that felt distinctly predatory. "You know, our community doesn't have a shared pool, which is such a shame. We've been discussing ways to create more resources for our residents, and I was wondering if you'd be open to allowing limited access to yours, just on weekends, for families who don't have one." I genuinely thought I misheard her. "You want me to let the neighborhood use my pool?" She smiled, like I had said something utterly naive. "Well, we're a community, after all. It's about sharing resources. A few people have young kids, and it would be so kind of you." I shook my head, a wave of disbelief washing over me. "I'm sorry, but that's not something I'm comfortable with." Her smile barely faltered, but something in her expression tightened, a subtle crack in the veneer. "Oh," she said, tucking her straight hair behind her ear, her voice dripping with veiled condescension. "Well, I suppose that's your right. For now." I didn't like the way she said that, the barely concealed threat humming beneath the surface. She left soon after, but the unease lingered like a bad omen. 3 days later, the first notice arrived, taped to my door like a scarlet letter. "Violation from the horror. Your lawn is not in compliance with standards. Please correct this within 72 hours or face a fine." I stared at the paper, then at my lawn. It was perfectly trimmed, not a single blade out of place. The next day, another letter. "Noise complaint filed against your property. Pool equipment is disruptive to the neighborhood. Utterly impossible." The filter ran for a few hours in the afternoon, and my nearest neighbor was a good distance away. Then came the parking violation, a fine for parking in my own driveway. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. I had offended Marsha, and she was making damn sure I paid the price. I tried to be civil, to appeal to whatever shred of decency she might possess. I walked down the street to her house, my anger simmering beneath a thin veneer of politeness. When she answered, she looked shockingly insincere. "What can I do for you?" I didn't bother with small talk. "These notices I'm getting, this is retaliation, isn't it?" Her expression didn't change, not even a flicker of guilt. "I have no idea what you mean." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to keep my voice even. "My lawn is fine, my pool filter isn't loud, and I can park in my own driveway." She gave me a slow, measured look, her eyes cold and calculating. Then, she smiled, that same practiced, empty smile. "I simply ensure they are followed. If you're receiving notices, it means you're not meeting our standards. It's nothing personal." The way she said it, so smooth and polished, made it clear she had done this before, crushing anyone who dared to cross her. I clenched my jaw, fighting to contain my rage. I turned to leave, defeated. "Oh," she said, her voice light, almost amused. "One more thing. There's a meeting next week. We'll be discussing some exciting new proposals. I do hope you attend." I didn't like the way she said that, not one bit, and I liked it even less when I received the next letter. Emergency meeting to vote on the establishment of a shared pool access program. Residents with pools may be required to participate as part of community improvement efforts. I read it 3 times, The words blown together as a wave of disbelief and fury washed over me. They were trying to take my pool. I slammed the letter down, my hand shaking with barely controlled rage. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the letter until the words swam before my eyes. Shared pool access program. Required participation. They were actually trying to force me to open my backyard to the entire neighborhood. A dull throb started at the base of my skull. This wasn't about community or helping families. This was Marsha testing how far she could push me. I wasn't going to let her win. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at Oakridge Estates clubhouse. A pretentious name for what was essentially a repurposed garage at the end of the street. I wasn't the type to get involved in neighborhood politics, but I knew one thing. If I didn't show up, they would railroad this decision through without me. I spent the next few days digging through the bylaws, desperately hoping to find something, anything, that would shut this down before it even started. There was nothing explicitly stating that they couldn't force private property owners to share amenities, but there were a lot of vague clauses about community improvement efforts and mandatory participation in neighborhood initiatives, just enough legal grey area for Marsha to twist into whatever she wanted. I needed to be ready. The meeting felt like a rigged game from the moment I arrived at the clubhouse. The folding chairs were mostly filled, and I recognized a few faces, neighbors I had seen walking their dogs or watering their lawns. None of them looked at me directly. A few wouldn't meet my eyes at all. Marsha stood at the front, clipboard in hand, exuding the kind of confidence only a politician who already knows the election results can possess. "Let's get started," she said, her smile radiating condescension. She breezed through the usual agenda items, budget updates, landscaping plans, some ridiculous nonsense about mailbox uniformity, before finally getting to the real reason we were all there. "As many of you know," she said smoothly, "we've been discussing ways to make Oakridge Estates more enjoyable for all residents. One issue that has come up repeatedly is the lack of a community pool. Now, while a brand new facility is out of our budget for the foreseeable future, we do have several private pools in the neighborhood that could be utilized as a shared resource." Her eyes flicked to me, just for a split second, but long enough for me to feel the challenge, the barely concealed threat in her gaze. After careful consideration, she continued, "The board has drafted a proposal allowing select private pools to be incorporated into a community access program. Of course, owners would be fairly compensated for their participation." Compensated? She didn't even say how. Reduced hoe fees, a gift card, a pat on the back. A murmur went through the crowd. Some people nodded, as if this all made perfect sense. Others looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. I cleared my throat, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent room. What happens if a homeowner says no? Marsha's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed imperceptibly. "Well, the board would have to take a vote, of course, but this is about what's best for the community." I leaned forward, my voice laced with steel. "So, if I refuse, you're going to try to force me?" She let out a practiced laugh, the sound grating on my nerves. "Oh, no one is being forced, but members have a duty to contribute. That's what you agreed to when you moved in." That was it. That was the loophole she was going to exploit, the twisted logic she was going to use to justify her power grab. I felt my pulse hammering against my ribs. That's not how property rights work. Marsha just smiled, that infuriatingly placid, condescending smile. The discussion dragged on, full of carefully worded manipulation. Phrases like community, enrichment, and neighborhood cooperation used to mask the blatant attempt to seize control. I finally realized what this was. The meeting wasn't about debating anything. It was a show of formality. Marsha already had the votes lined up. The board members were just nodding along, rubber stamping whatever she said. This was already decided. I should have seen it coming. The next morning, I noticed the stares. Neighbors who used to nod in passing suddenly wouldn't look at me. Some whispered behind their hands when I walked by. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I overheard a conversation between two women at the mailbox cluster down the street. "I just don't understand why he's being so selfish," one of them murmured, her voice laced with disapproval. "It's just a pool. He doesn't even have kids. Mind your Titan." I could feel the judgment, the condemnation, like a physical weight pressing down on me. That same day, I found a note taped to my fence. "Don't be a bad neighbor. Everyone should contribute." No signature, just a passive-aggressive jab meant to make me feel guilty. By the end of the week, I had 3 more. The house suddenly decided my fence was slightly faded and therefore a violation. Then, my mailbox was non-compliant because it wasn't the exact shade of approved black. Then, my backyard shed was too close to the property line by a mere 6 inches. Every day, another notice, another fine, another excuse to make my life miserable. They wanted to wear me down, to make me fold, to make me comply. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. They wanted to push me. Let's see how they handled it when I pushed back. I knew that trying to reason with the HOA was pointless. Marsha had too much control, and she had the board wrapped around her finger. The only way to stop her was to fight her on her own turf, legally, publicly, and in a way that that would humiliate her in front of the very people she had manipulated. So I got to work. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one specializing in HOA disputes. I didn't care how much it cost. This was about principle now. My attorney, David Castillo, was aggressive, sharp-witted, and absolutely delighted by my case. They're overstepping big time. He told me during our first call, his voice buzzing with righteous indignation. They can't just force you to share your pool, no matter how they try to word it. This isn't a socialist commune. I sent him copies of every file, every notice, every passive-aggressive letter. He tore through the bylaws like a wolf with fresh meat. And that's when we found it. The loophole that would bring Marsha down, hidden deep in the bylaws, buried beneath layers of legal jargon, was a rule Marsha had overlooked. Any major policy changes affecting private property required the approval of 75% of homeowners. Not just the board. That meant Marsha's staged vote at the last meeting was completely invalid. I didn't say a word. I let her and her little group continue their harassment campaign while I prepared my next move. I wasn't the only one who hated Marsha. In the weeks following the meeting, I quietly started talking to my neighbors, the ones who'd been fined for ridiculous reasons, the ones who were sick of the constant micromanaging. Turns out, a lot of people resented Marsha, but were too afraid to fight back. Once I showed them how she had lied about the pool vote, how she was trying to seize control of private property, something shifted. People started listening, and once I had them on my side, I called for a vote of no confidence in Marsha's leadership. According to the bylaws, if 51% of homeowners signed a petition, we could hold an election to remove her as president. It took 2 weeks to get the signatures, but once I had them, I dropped the bombshell. The next horror meeting was standing room only. Word had spread, people were angry, and they wanted answers. Marsha walked in like always, clipboard in hand, her fake smile in place. But the moment I stood up and handed the board my petition, that smile vanished. I'm invoking our right to call a vote of no confidence, I said, my voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. We have more than enough signatures to hold an election to remove Marsha Delacroix as president. The room erupted. Marsha stammered, flipping frantically through her notes. This is outrageous. You don't have the authority. Oh, but we do. I held up a copy of the bylaws, waving it for all to see. It's all right here. Unlike you, I actually read them. A murmur ran through the crowd, a wave of discontent spreading through the room. The board members exchanged uncertain looks, their faces pale. And then came the final nail in her coffin. David, my lawyer, stood up, his voice booming with authority. By the way, since we're on the topic of legalities, Marsha, your attempt to enforce the shared pool policy was completely illegal. The bylaws state that any policy affecting private property requires 75% homeowner approval. You didn't have that. What you did was an abuse of power. The room went dead silent. Marsha's face turned crimson. I was only trying to do what's best for the community. Someone scoffed. Another person booed. The vote was called on the spot. She lost. Losing the presidency wasn't enough for me. I wanted her gone. So I kept digging. With David's help, we uncovered a gold mine. Marsha had been using her funds for personal expenses. Money had been spent on spa treatments, a home renovation, and, best of all, a business trip to Miami that had nothing to do with the whole, all paid for with our dues. The board had no choice but to launch a full investigation. She was fined, forced to pay everything back, and when the legal threats started rolling in, she finally resigned from the HOA entirely. Her house went up for sale. She moved out quietly, without fanfare, no goodbye parties, no friendly farewells. She left the same way she ruled, alone. The first thing I did after she was gone was throw a massive pool party, but only for the neighbors who had helped me take her down. The best part, I made sure to personally send an invitation to Marsha's new address, just so she knew exactly what she had missed. And that's how I won. I kept my pool, got rid of Marsha, and made damn sure that no one in Oakridge Estates would ever try to mess with me again. So, Reddit, tell me honestly, based on everything you've heard, did I handle this situation correctly? Was I justified in fighting back so fiercely, or should I have tried to be more conciliatory? I'm genuinely curious to hear your opinions and perspectives.